I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to part one of my brand new series entitled The Evil Within. This is part one, the introductory segment of this series. It focuses on the concept of evil. Now, in the 36 years that I've run the Future of Freedom Foundation, I've periodically referred to evil, but mostly concentrated on making the moral case for freedom, and to a certain extent, the utilitarian case. The moral case is simply that people have a right to be free. This is a fundamental God-given right. It adheres to us as part of our humanity, and that no government, including the U.S. government, has any legitimate authority to take away people's freedom. That's been the primary thrust of our work here at FFF. That is identifying what are the infringements on freedom, and then what we need to do and why we should eliminate these infringements as compared to reforming them, improving them, fixing them up, and so forth. And then secondarily, the utilitarian case for genuine freedom, and that is that it increases standards of living between people, it creates harmonies between people, and so forth. And so I've periodically made reference to the concept of evil over the 36 years, but never really focused in on it. I intend to do that in this series, and I invite you to join me in this exploration of this subject. Many years ago, I read a book called The Road Less Traveled by a psychiatrist named M. Scott Peck. Fantastic book. I highly recommend it. Later, Peck wrote a very, very profound book, very disturbing, called People of the Lie. And it was an examination of evil in the world. Now, granted, there are lots of people who don't believe that there's evil in the world, that's just a concept that doesn't exist for some people. Those people who don't believe that evil exists in the world probably will not find this series very satisfying. You might find it interesting anyway, even if one doesn't buy into the concept of evil. But if you do believe that evil exists in the world, then I think you will find this exploration of evil, the evil within, to be interesting and hopefully of value. When I talk about the evil within, I'm talking about the evil that exists within the U.S. government. Now, again, we talk in terms of the infringements on liberty that the government engages in. I'll be doing that to a certain extent because for me, anything that is destructive of human freedom is evil. But what I will specifically be doing is talking about, over the next 9 segments after this series, is the particular systems that have been engrafted onto the federal government that are evil. They're like cancerous tumors, 9 different systems, 9 different cancerous tumors. Now, if you get rid of one tumor, that's a good thing. Okay, anybody's got cancer and there's 9 independent tumors on the body, or in this case, the body politic, and you get rid of one, that's a good thing. But we all know that it's not sufficient. In order to restore health to the body or the body politic, it's necessary to get rid of one, get rid of the next one, get rid of the next one, and get rid of all 9. You can't just get rid of 8 and then leave the 9th one and say, well, now I'm okay, I'm healthy, because you still got that 9th independent cancerous tumor. And so what I will be talking about in each segment is each of these cancerous tumors within the U.S. government that have engrafted themselves onto the government. There are people within the libertarian movement that obviously hate the federal government entirely. I was in a debate a while back with other libertarians, and somebody in the audience during the Q&A session said, do y'all all hate the government? And every one of the other panelists, I think, most of them said, oh, yeah, I hate the government, I hate the government. Well, my answer was completely different. My answer was, no, I don't hate the government. And it met with a resounding chorus of boos. Because as everybody knows in the libertarian movement, there are anarchists, that is, people that don't believe in any government at all. They want to abolish the Congress and the Supreme Court and the presidency and all the state legislatures and all the federal judiciary, just anarchy, total anarchy all across America. Okay, I'm not one of those. I don't believe anarchy is a viable paradigm, and I contend that it would simply result in the strongest gang taking over and ending up in power is the sole government anyway, if you will. So I do believe in limited government. What I hate, and I explain this to the audience, are the illegitimate functions of the federal government. That is, these cancerous tumors, these illegitimate systems, these evil systems that have attached themselves onto the federal government. That's what I hate. And that's what I'll be examining. Segment after segment after segment, each of these systems. Now, the problem we face in America is, or one of the big problems we face in America, is that all too many Americans honestly believe that they live in a free society. And that's a huge obstacle. That here they are living under a system of great evil, with these 9 systems that are now, entwined, integrated into the federal government, that they're considered normal. They're considered part of our free society. And people have been indoctrinated with the notion that this is all part of America and that America's freedom. And so they don't question this evil within. In fact, they don't even recognize it as evil. And part of the problem with this whole system is the stultification of conscience, where people don't exercise their conscience in large aspects of their lives. They defer their conscience to the federal government, and whatever the federal government decides, that's their position. And the problem is that their minds have been encased since the first grade, in a maybe even before, in what is like a concrete cocoon of indoctrination, in which they're convinced that they're living in a free society, falsely, but that's their reality. The reality is what they see inside this cocoon. And so that's an enormous obstacle. I've seen this in the 36 years I've been running FFF. I've encountered, naturally, people whose minds are, contained within this concrete cocoon of indoctrination. And the reason I can relate to this is because I was there myself. I grew up convinced that I lived in a free society. There wasn't any question in my mind. I mean, we're all convinced of that. We go to school, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America with justice and liberty for all. And we know that people aren't free in North Korea or Red China or other countries, but here in the United States. It's that Lee Greenwood song, something to the effect of, thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. And that was my mindset. My mind was encased in this concrete cocoon of indoctrination. And I remember a friend back in the mid-1970s, after I had gone back to my hometown of Laredo, Texas to practice law, he recommended a book to me called A Time for Truth by William Simon. And Simon, I think, had been Secretary of the Treasury under Reagan. And Simon wrote this book talking about the need to restore freedom to America. And I read through it. And of course, brilliant guy and very well-written book. I don't recall all the details now, but I remember going to my friend and saying, Jack, I really enjoyed this book, but is really weird about this guy talking about restoring freedom to America, because we are free here. And so I found that really weird. Well, that's how people whose minds are encased in this concrete cocoon view us libertarians. It's like, weird. God, you guys believe in that? That's weird. And they look at our positions as just totally weird. But they don't want anything to interfere with this cocoon. They're very satisfied within this cocoon. Many of them go to their deathbeds encased in this false reality inside this cocoon, and they don't want anybody to disturb it. So I've known people over the years that have never said to me, why do you believe the way you believe? Now, they have a sort of a sense of what I believe, but they will never engage in conversation to say, explain to me why you believe in this weird stuff. They don't want to know the why. It's too threatening. It's too scary, because it sort of starts to shake up this cocoon, and they don't want anything to shake up that cocoon. So, I've interacted with people and different aspects of life, non-libertarians, and I just find it fascinating that they never say. I know what they're thinking. God, his positions are really weird. Like open borders, or abolish Social Security and Medicare, or legalize all drugs, but they don't say, how did you arrive at these conclusions? It's like they don't want to know. I recently had one experience about Iran where this guy says something about, well, the Iranians are terrible. They took our diplomats hostage in 1979. And I said, well, yeah, but what happened? Don't you think you ought to put that in context of what happened in 53? He says, I don't know anything about that. And he changed the subject. He didn't say, what happened in 1953? Just didn't want to know. Just totally changed the subject. And that's the thing about these people inside encased in these cocoons, is they don't want to ask anything about what libertarians believe in and why they believe it. Well, what ends up happening with me is that, after I'd read Simon's book, I don't know, a couple years later or something, I walk into the public library of Laredo, Texas, my hometown, looking for something to read, and I find these 4 little books called Essays on Liberty, volumes 1 through 4, that had been published by the Foundation for Economic Education, where ironically I ended up going to work for a couple of years as their program director. Later in the late 1980s, I gave up the practice of law to take that job. But these guys had written these books, these essays in these books, 20 years before, in the 1950s. I'm sure never anticipating that their ideas would find their way in a public library in Laredo, Texas, 20 years later, and influence the course of a young lawyer's life. They changed the course of my life. But as I'm reading these essays, they were so powerful. They were so pure, uncompromising presentations of libertarianism that they just cracked. I could feel this cocoon, this concrete cocoon, cracking apart. And now I'm facing reality. We're not free at all. And it was a road to Damascus experience. I took all 4 books home. I pored over them. I reread them. I read them again. It was an incredible experience. Like I say, it changed the course of my life. But it was only the power of those essays, the principles involved there, the principled presentation of libertarianism, that had the power to do that. I think if those essays had just been reform-oriented, how to reform the Social Security and reform Medicare and reform immigration controls and make the immigration system more benign and gentle, but make it work to secure the borders, and all these things that we read about today, much of which is in the libertarian movement, I don't think it would have been sufficiently powerful to crack this inches-thick layer of indoctrination. And so that's what the inspiration is at FFF. I mean, that's why we don't go down this road of reform and fixing improvements or whatever, because I don't think it's got the power to crack through this indoctrination that encases people's mind. Now, I don't know what it takes to do that, because if a person doesn't want to know, doesn't want this thing cracked, doesn't want to even acknowledge the possibility that he's suffering under indoctrination. In fact, I was once given a talk, and I was talking about this concept, and this status guy says, "Are you saying that we're indoctrinated?" And he was like shocked. I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying." But I said, "You don't recognize it." I mean, the best forms of indoctrination are where the person who's indoctrinated doesn't realize he's been indoctrinated. And that was my situation. Before I discovered those 4 little books, I didn't know I'd been indoctrinated. I was convinced I was living a free life. And then I realized, my gosh, I've been lied to all this time. And the government does lie. And one of the big areas that it has lied about is this area of freedom. And so in our essays at FFF, what we've always done is raise people's vision to a higher level, because we're not interested in a warmed over serfdom. That's what we are, really. We're serfs. When you look at things like the income tax, where government controls how much you permitted to keep, like an allowance, or conscription, where the government can draft people and force them to serve and kill and be killed, and in the military. And I mean, there's no question that we live lives of serfdom. This is what Hayek was talking about in his famous book, The Road to Serfdom, which I think was published in 1944, that the West was on the road to serfdom, specifically Great Britain, also the United States. And, well, that road was reached. I mean, the end of that road was reached a long time ago. We do live lives as serfs. And so the way we've always figured it here at FFF, that if we devote ourselves to figuring out ways to reform the system or reduce it, all we're doing is just improving our serfdom way of life. Now, many libertarians have that engage in this, that have, in my opinion, just thrown in the towel on dismantling. They think it's just too big a job to dismantle these systems, these 9 systems, for example. They've reverted to reforming them, coming up with health savings accounts or school vouchers or things like this, military reform, CIA reform, drug war reform, asset forfeiture laws, and so forth. They've convinced themselves that they're advancing freedom. Well, they're not, in my opinion. They're over there making life better for the serfs. It would be like slaves, 19th century slaves, that if you have a group of libertarians in 1855 Alabama that secure legislation limiting the number of lashings per week, or providing better food for the slaves, letting them off on weekends, shorter work hours, better work conditions, permitting them a bit of education, well, that clearly would benefit the slaves, no question about it. But it's not freedom. It's not freedom. You're making the slavery better. And so it's the same with our serfdom. We can make our serfdom better, and I'm grateful, when people make my serfdom better. Shoot, I'm not going to complain, but it's just not freedom. And the problem with a lot of these libertarians think that, oh no, well, if they achieve school vouchers, they're freedom. No, school vouchers are just a socialist reform measure to make the public schooling system more viable through choice and competition and so forth. So that's been always our goal here, is presenting this vision for what liberty is. Now there's of course people that say, oh, Jacob, you're utopian, it can't be achieved. And that's why I always point to my favorite time in history, and that's 1870 to around 1910, maybe 1880 to 1910. Not libertarian panacea by any means. Every time I say this, somebody says, oh, what about this and what about that? And, Spanish-American War and the American Indians and the massacres. And okay, I'm not saying that it was a libertarian panacea. It clearly was not. Women's rights and so forth. Jim Crow was coming into existence at the time. What I'm saying is that they proved what's possible, that you can achieve a society with no income tax, Social Security, Federal Reserve, immigration controls, at least to a certain extent, public schooling, paper money, drug war, on and on. And so if they could do it, then it's not utopian, because utopian is something that cannot be achieved. And so what I've always said is that what we need to do is see what they've achieved and then build on it. Now, again, when I talk about these systems, or have talked about these systems, it's always in this context of freedom, that we don't want to improved, warmed over serfdom is our goal here at FFF. We want to be free. But I'm going to take it deeper now with this series and talk about evil. These systems are not only anti-freedom, not only are they anti-wealth building, higher standards of living, natural harmonies, they are actually evil. And I think that's important because it's one of the reasons why I have long opposed reform. Not just because reform isn't freedom. It all it does is, improve our well-being as serfs. Okay, that's fine. But I have no desire to live and die as a improved serf, or have an improved way of life. But even more important for me is that I don't want to get involved with trying to improve or reform evil. And if something's evil, that takes it to a whole different dimension. And that is that, do we want to spend our time trying to reform or improve, fix, reduce evil? And as compared to just an infringement on freedom. For me, for example, slavery was evil. Now, would fewer lashings improve the situation? Yeah, but it's still evil. And so I think it's incumbent, especially in a society that was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, that it focuses on this concept of evil. In his book, People of the Lie, Scott Peck talked about how evil concentrates itself in areas where it can do the most damage. Now, let me clarify something in this introductory section about evil. I won't be talking about evil people within this system, within this government. That to me is a fool's errand. Who's to decide who's evil and who's not evil? It's totally unnecessary. But at the same token, these people who devote their lives to getting better people in public office, what they're really doing is they're trying to get better people to manage evil. And when you've got good people, let's just assume that everybody is, well-intended, from President Trump all the way down. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And I do give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to sit here and say, President Trump's an evil man, or this person in charge of this agency is an evil person, or this ICE agent's an evil person. I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're all good people, let's say, that are involved in an evil system. And when you've got an evil system, the evil system's going to win out over the good people. It's actually worse when good people are participating in an evil system than just evil people participating in an evil system, because evil is using good as a way to advance evil. And that's not a good thing. And evil, as Peck said, evil will find where it can do the most damage, including church hierarchies. You could find evil there in the highest reaches of church hierarchies, the bureaucracies there, because they know that this is their threat. Churches are based on goodness, Christian principles, and so forth. And so if you can concentrate evil in those areas, you can do a lot of damage. But the thing about government is government has the monopoly of force in society. It can do a lot of damage because it has the power to kill, the power to torture people, the power to incarcerate people for doing nothing except something that would be considered innocent, like dissent. And so evil would naturally, and Peck points this out. He pointed to the My Lai massacre there in the Vietnam War, where evil would naturally concentrate in government. And so what my argument is going to be in this series is that evil has concentrated itself in government through the systems that have been engrafted on to the federal government. Now, I said earlier that I'm not an anarchist. Okay, well, what do I believe? Well, I believe in genuine, limited government. Governments whose powers are limited to legitimate functions, like punishing, going after, targeting, protecting people from murderers and thieves and rapists and the like. A while back, I've got an alarm system in my townhouse, and a while back my alarm went off and I didn't get it to it enough time, and they called and I missed the phone call, and so I called them back and I said, hey, don't send the police, everything's okay, I just screwed up on the alarm. And they said, well, it's too late, we've already summoned them. In 5 minutes or less, there was a deputy sheriff at my front door. It was incredible. And he says, hey, is everything okay? Well, at that moment, this guy is my friend. If there's somebody breaking into my house, wanting to rob me, kill me, or whatever, that deputy sheriff is my best friend. And if government were limited to that type of thing, I think people would take a totally different attitude toward law enforcement. Because then they're there helping you do the right thing here to evict this marauder inside your house. They're trying to get into your house. And then, providing a means by which people can resolve disputes. This is part of the problem with anarchy, is that when people get into a dispute, they go into court and they fight it out, assuming they can't settle the case, and the jury or the judge rules on one side versus the other. The other side can appeal and goes to the Supreme Court, and there's a final judgment. With anarchy, there's no final judgment because all the court systems are equal in terms of power. Well, not in terms of power, but in terms of their own ability to render judgment. So you have these competing judgments that is ultimately going to be resolved through force, through fighting, conflict. And so the most powerful one is going to win. But here, under limited government, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. Now, that's not to say always that the right side wins, but it's the best system there is. The jury system, for example, it's the best system there is in determining justice. And then there's a final judgment, and that judgment's enforced. So that's my ideal. This is why I like government. I like that deputy sheriff coming over to my house. And so what has happened, though, over time is that the evil within the federal government has come to engraft itself as just a permanent fixture, like a permanent cancerous tumor onto the government. In 9, maybe more, but I'm going to focus on 9 big areas, 9 big cancerous tumors that have become part of the body politic, the 9 evil systems, and that in order to establish a good society, a free society, a harmonious society, a moral society, it is absolutely necessary. A necessary prerequisite is to get rid of these evil systems. And that getting rid of one evil system is just not enough. Now, can we do it? Well, of course we can. But that's where the power of ideas comes in. This is what we do here at FFF. We put this overall picture out into the marketplace of ideas with our essays, our videos, and whatever. We can't control the outcome. There's that old saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. That it's up to the American people as to what they want in a society, in a governmental system. But what we do is we say, here's your choice, because you're not living in a free society. You're living under a government that has evil within it, massive evil, consisting of at least these 9 different systems that we've all been taught is all part of a free society. We've been indoctrinated with that. That's that cocoon, that concrete cocoon of indoctrination. And so in order to achieve what we all want is a free society, a moral society, a harmonious society, a peaceful society, you got to get rid of this evil, which in this case involves not just one. It's a Herculean task to get rid of 9 independent systems of evil that over the centuries have engrafted them onto this system of limited government that I described earlier. I mean, this is why I said at that debate, I don't hate government. I mean, if government were in this limited state that I talked about, if we got rid of these 9 evil systems, I'd be very happy with the government, because then we're talking about this deputy sheriff coming over and helping me out, to get this guy that's trying to break into my house, or providing a court system to resolve disputes, protecting us in case any kind of foreign marauders come in. So it's a totally different way of life than what we have today. So that's what this series is going to be based on. It's going to be based on an examination of evil, the evil within our own government. And each segment's going to be focusing on each of these systems that have become part of America's federal governmental system. Let me see if I'm missing anything else that I want to cover in this introductory section. I think that's it. That's your introductory segment to the evil within, and I invite you to engage in this exploration with me as to what we need to do to get this country back on the right track. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for your great support of FFF. You enable us to do programs like this, and you enable us to advance liberty and get this nation back on the right track. Until next time.